over the next decade, 2 decades?
Yeah, there are various estimates about when that's going to happen.
How do we bring them online?
Well, it's really the question. I mean, because you can't talk about a free and open internet without talking about how you get access to folks in the first place. So I think the solutions to that problem are going to come from a lot of different places. And for our part, we're really focused on some fairly innovative programs. I don't know if any of you have heard of this thing called Project Loon. Right? So what we're doing is we're launching balloons into the atmosphere. This is going to sound a little crazy, but it's working. We're launching balloons into the atmosphere that are beaming broadband down to hard-to-reach communities. And they're sort of rotating along just like a weather balloon would. And they're getting access to people who wouldn't otherwise be reached. We started off in New Zealand. The government asked us to start off there. They were really inviting because they have, we wouldn't normally think of that, but they have an access issue there. There's a large part of that country are in very rural areas that are hard to reach. So we started off there, and now we have a number of these balloons up, and they're doing their work. We're also a big believer in fiber. That it's one thing to get access, but the question is, what happens when you connect people to really fast broadband? And we don't know the answer to that. We're just thinking, you know, connect it and see what they come up with. So we've started these fiber programs in some markets here in the United States, and we also just launched a fiber ring in Africa. And again, this is all early stages. And I'm not saying that the access issue is going to be solved by Loon or by fiber alone, but I think these innovative solutions are going to be part of the problem. I mean, I was a regulator on the California Public Utilities Commission, and telecommunications companies sometimes have a great deal of difficulty using old technology to reach really difficult, hard-to-reach places, right? And so I think it's a combination of that approach and then some more innovative approaches as well.
But what you're describing is really this incredible leapfrogging of technology and moving forward at just a tremendous rate.
Absolutely. Look, I was lucky enough. I studied in Egypt when I was in college for a couple months. When I was in Cairo, it was, I think, in the waiting list to get a landline telephone was 2 or 3 years. You had to wait. You put in your application. 3 years later, you get a landline. What happened is that mobile phones happened, right? And so no one bothers with a landline anymore. Everyone, as you saw from that picture, that was actually Tahrir Square. Everyone has a mobile device. So one of the solutions, the access solutions, of course, it's really all about mobile. We're not talking about landlines anymore. We're talking about connecting people through their mobile devices. In many parts of Africa, it's not just the infrastructure issue. We're still trying to convince people in Africa that they should have a mobile phone. There's no content that's necessarily relevant to them. It's not in their language. They're thinking, why do I need this thing? So what we've been doing is taking some of our applications that would be on a smartphone, and we're, in effect, dumbing them down, and we're re-engineering them for a regular feature phone. People in Africa are doing banking on a feature phone now, and we think that that is driving demand. We've always known that what really drives internet access and deployment is demand. If consumers demand it and want it, then those demands are going to be met through the market. So I guess I've gotten off topic a little bit, but but it's absolutely right that technology is leapfrogging over what we thought had to be the solutions. So Loon and fiber sound great right now, but 10 years from now, if I'm looking at a video of this talk, I may look at myself and think, oh, God, that's so funny that you thought that was it.
Well, but that's just
because something else.
We don't know today what's going to happen the day after tomorrow. We have a hard enough time figuring out what's happening tomorrow. And you were talking about infrastructure, you were talking about technology. I'd like to get you to talk a little bit about institutions, right? There are so many 20th century institutions that sort of govern our ways of life in almost any country, and certainly here in the United States. How do those institutions adapt to the 21st century technology that now exists?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution, but I think the message is you either will adapt or you're going to die. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We saw We saw that, you know, there's no doubt that the internet has decimated some old world business models. You know, we've had a really hard time ensuring that quality journalism in the first few years survived what online content did to the newspaper industry. Now they've adapted and they've adjusted pretty well, and they've seen the power that, you know, the online world can provide to them. But I think the industries and the institutions that have really faltered were the ones who really fought the progress, who fought this technology. They didn't want to engage. And you know, it's changed the way we get our news. It's changed the way we listen to music. It's changed everything. So you've got to adapt.
So there are lots of great things about this openness, but there's also that underbelly that you touched on a little bit. And I think, you know, part of the debate revolves around privacy and protection of information if there's so much out there.
Right.
How do we go about protecting ourselves?
Well, you know, at Google, we take data security and privacy incredibly seriously. And we do it because we have to. It's the right thing to do, obviously. It's a smart thing to do, but we also know that if we don't do it, our users are going to go somewhere else. They demand it. So we started doing things years ago. I think in 2010, we started encrypting all of Gmail traffic automatically. All of searches are now automatically default if you're using Chrome or browser are encrypted. All of our email traffic to other email providers is encrypted to the point that it reaches those other providers. And we started doing that years ago. We also, you know, really take a lot of pride in the work that we do to keep our systems and our user data safe from cyber attacks. And we're very open about this as an issue. You know, so I spent 3 years in China. I was sent out to Asia right around 2010, right at the beginning of when the whole Google China thing happened, when we eventually moved our search services out of China. Now, one of the things that precipitated that was a very sophisticated cyber attack on our systems. And we were very public about that. You know, the idea is if you're not transparent about something, if you don't acknowledge that something is happening, then how can you have a conversation about it and how can you fix it? The interesting thing about that cyber attack is that there were about 20 other companies that were attacked at the same time, and not one of them has gone public about it. It's only when the New York Times itself was attacked did they go public about it. And then the Wall Street Journal was cyber attacked as well, and they went public about it. So, I mean, our commitment to these issues, you know, takes various shapes and forms. The other thing I want to say is that, you know, when it comes to our users' data, we really believe in being transparent and giving control to our users. If you're a Google user, you can go to this thing called the dashboard, and you can see what data is there based on your services. We make it very easy if you don't like Google and you want to go somewhere else. There's basically a very short, you know, thing you have to do, and you can take all your data with you. So our commitment to these issues goes beyond just protecting your data. It's about giving you control and giving you, transparency into what's going on. Again, because if you don't know what's going on, then you really can't have a meaningful debate about this.
So, I mean, that's the company's commitment. But I think also you have a great personal story about a personal commitment. You've been very outspoken in your criticism of censorship. And if I understand correctly, that contributed to you leaving China, sort of how outspoken you were. Can you talk a little bit about some of those censorship issues that you've sort of bumped up against and how you've been trying to deal with them?
But Asia is just it's a remarkable part of the world for any number of reasons. And so when I was out there, my responsibility was all of the Asia Pacific region. So it wasn't just China. I mean, that's sort of the poster child, right? But in country after country in that part of the world, we're seeing governments, what they're really doing is struggling with this issue. I don't say what country, but I was meeting with an ambassador of an Asian country, and he took me aside, we had this big meeting, he took me aside afterwards, just the two of us, and he said, so what is this internet thing? Like, and you know, I don't get it, but what is it, and what is it all about? And what that told me is that a lot of these folks are really struggling with the basics still in that part of the world, right? And so as they do that, they're really trying to figure out how they deal with this, incredible technology, this incredible tool, which is upending everything that they know. And do they censor it? Do they let it flourish? Do they go the free and open route? And so, it was a remarkable time in my life. I think more than anything else, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, after 3 years of being on the road every week, I wanted to come home more than anything else. But my phone was hacked when I was over there a couple times, and you just see how a different part of the world is dealing with some of these issues, and it really does give you an appreciation, to be honest, for being an American.
So I'd like to come back to your starting point, your niece, Eleanor. And she is. And I mean, it reminded me, sort of seeing that my dad was a computer scientist, and when I was growing up, I heard about this project he worked on called Moby Dick, which was a computer that fit on the back of two 18-wheelers and had way less computing power than what we carry around in our pockets today. And I was reminded of how quickly these changes in technology take place. And so looking at 4-year-old Eleanor and thinking about the way that she's growing up, as you look at across generations, do you notice challenges in communication between sort of those who don't necessarily come from the Stone Age, but who are not as sort of technically adept as that next generation, and how one goes about bridging those gaps?
I don't think I have any special insights on that. I would bet everyone in this room has experienced that. I mean, I've been on the phone with my mom and trying to walk her through how to send an email, and the only reason my parents got online, to be perfectly honest, is when when I was in California and they decided they wanted to talk to me. Again, it's either the content or what people want to do which is going to drive the adoption and the access issue. So yeah, absolutely. But I think what we're seeing is, people are adapting. My mom and dad, my dad, is on Facebook all the time now, which is a really interesting phenomenon. He's liking posts and doing all this sort of stuff. So people are adapting and adjusting to that. So I'm not too worried about it. I mean, I think what's a really interesting issue is, as I was saying in my remarks, is how is Eleanor going to think about the world and having grown up, always being connected, and what does that do to her idea of what is private versus not private, what she's going to put online or she's not going to put online. And I think we definitely went through a period where we saw people, especially young people, struggling with that. I remember I was in the governor's office, and I was hiring someone on the staff, and everything was great interview, everything looked good, and I decided I'm just going to go check out this person's profile on Facebook. And, it was all photos of him at college, in various states of inebriation, doing all sorts of things that some college students did. And I hired him. But I told them, you got to think about this, especially if you're going to be in the governor's office. You're a public official now. You can't just have that stuff up there. So I think, with all of this stuff, it's not like this seamless transition, everything is fine and easy. There are starts and stops and some hiccups and road bumps, but we're getting there, and I think we're going to continue to get there.
So I have one more question for you before we open it up, and I'm hoping that all of you are trying to think of really good questions. But I feel like I'd be remiss in not asking you about your opinion about the news yesterday and today coming from Austin, Texas, and the South by Southwest festival. Edward Snowden spoke, and he really talked about the protection of privacy. We've talked a little bit about privacy. You talked about it in your remarks too. But that sort of led to a number of statements and comments in the media about whose responsibility is it. And there were several people who came out and said it is companies like Google that carry some responsibility in protecting people's privacy. Can you talk a little bit more about the privacy issue and sort of how you see that playing out as well, because I do think that that's a concern for everybody who uses the internet, as we all do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, our approach to privacy and user data is about transparency and giving users control. So what we try and do is we let our users know very clearly the sort of data that's being collected if they use our services, if they choose to use our services, what sort of data we collect on them. And we give you control over it. We give you the option to wipe it all clean, take it away if you want to, or give you the option of not allowing us to collect it in the first place. The reality of all this stuff is that these services are free and paid for by advertising. And the collection of data is part of how that works. But we do give users the ability to use our services without being signed in. And we give them the ability to not have ads shown to them or to wipe clean the sort of categories of advertising. And so, given the reality of that business model, that's why we've really focused on transparency and user control. Now, the other part of that is the encryption issue that I talked about. We really take that extremely seriously, as I said, because we think we have to, it's the right thing to do, and we know our users demand it. Like, if you don't feel safe with your emails on Gmail, you're going to use some other service. And we know that. And the thing about our business model is that competition is one click away. There's nothing stopping anyone from saying, you know what, I just don't think I like Google anymore. I'm going to go to any one of our competitors. And we think about that a lot. And it's what I was talking about putting the user first. You know, we really think about the user, each and every product we build, every policy decision we make. What does the user want?
Okay, thanks. Let's open it up. My colleague Andrea has a microphone. My request is that you introduce yourself so Ross knows who he's talking to, and there's a question right up here in front.
Thank you. My name is Charlie Orr. I was born in